Hey folks, so let's go ahead and talk about willow pollarding, okay? And that is different from willow coppicing. We'll have a completely separate video on that. Your main difference is going to be where you cut them, okay? So coppicing, cutting at the ground, okay? And we'll go over why we do that in some other videos and what the benefits of that one are. Right now, we're gonna talk about willow pollarding, okay? And that is anything above ground height. That could just be 1 foot above the ground, or 6 to 8 foot above the ground, or 30 foot in the air in the case of some street trees that are pollarded, all right? So we do 3 different heights of pollarding with willows on our farm, okay? So we do ones that are about 18 inches off the ground. We do some that are about 4 foot tall off the ground. And then we do some that are 6 to 8 foot tall off the ground. And we have different reasons for each of those. Let's go ahead and flip you around and show you some of these more medium size or 4 foot ones and why we do those ones real quick. So here are our 4 foot tall ones, right? And the reason I do these is because our pigs are about 29 to 32 inches tall, full grown at the back, okay? So what they do for me, because these willows, they'll sprout from the trunks the whole height, okay? They don't care. They'll just make an entire big fuzzy stick. But what I want are these nice clear free stems and a knob of growth up at the top, all right? And we'll go into detail in a sec why I want that. But the pigs help me manage that by rubbing on these, by chewing off the little branches as they try to come off the stems there. So they help me maintain that structure throughout the season. Typically, if you were doing this, you'd have to go throughout the season and strip off that epicormic branching below the nub that you want, all right? So now the reason I want this, if we squat back here, maybe we can kind of see that. So you see all these trees through here that are at about this height, all through there. This essentially forms a living barn for the pigs, okay? So all through the summer, when these are leafed out like this forms a big strip of shade right down the middle of this paddock. Now these ones are all young. This is their 3rd year of growth, and they had 2 years in a row of drought. So this paddock, they haven't grown as much as they could and should, and I'll show you in another one of the pollards when we get further up what they can do in 1 year of growth when they're really established. But this creates this big thing of shade right through this low area that snakes. There's a wallow there. It snakes down, over, around, and through. And I know I've showed this in a couple other videos. But yeah, this is where we did it. And we have a few of these throughout the farm, okay, that are scattered about. You can kind of maybe see some over there. They snake up and towards the pond. Far over on the other side, we have the same thing. There's a thing that snakes through, drops down, and it actually kind of runs back around and ties into this one. So we plant these through here. We call these our field plantings because when we're planting in beds, so our standard willow cuttings that we sell every year, we'll do about a 18-inch long cutting about this thick. These are, but we go anywhere between a Sharpie, like a standard Sharpie, to a king size Sharpie, and that's our cutting size. So this one would be a good size cutting, about there to about there, and that'd be it. That'd be a normal size cutting. But we grow a few branches. These guys out here don't have any on them. But what we plant, when we plant out in our fields like these, we call either our field planting ones or our Silvopasture ones, are 4 to 6 foot tall cuttings. And 4 is a little shorter than I'd like, because if I plant a 4 foot tall one, that'd be one of these. See where the top died here. Then that means, and you can see where it'll grow leaves all throughout the stem there. Pigs have been back off this one for a little bit. That only leaves me at about 3 foot at the top, if it's 12 inches in the ground. And I really like to put in 2 foot in the ground and still be 4 foot above the ground for these ones, so that there is plenty of nub height. You can see, because they'll die back. A little bit of the top won't make it on a lot of them, and it'll just die off like that, okay? And there's a little bit of green where that got a little, so don't do what I just did. I just damaged that a little, but that's okay. It'll heal up around it. You can see where the pigs have chewed and pulled bark, but it's healing itself back up and sealing the wound. Because the pigs are still destructive. I expect to lose 10 to 20% of these their first year when they're just planted out. And then every year thereafter, about 5 or so % of these. But the kicker is, and these are just ones for the pigs. Like their entire purpose is shade for the pigs. And then we'll get those ancillary products. So our coppice, or our cuttings for biochar off of these, and we'll get our willow cuttings to sell to folks to start their own plantings off of these every so many years. I'll never cut the full run the same year in any paddock. We wouldn't cut more than 25 to 30% of these every year. So then they'll get about 3 years worth of growth, which will be really big. This is pretty small because it's still establishing that good root base. This one close to the wallow, of course, has the best growth, but that's their entire purpose out here is mostly for wildlife habitat. We get a lot of bird's nest builds in these ones. I think there's actually a bird's nest right over here. Wander over. Oh no, looks like it finally fell out. Yeah, it was there. But I know I did it in a short, I put that bird's nest in one. But this is what we're after. Just this nubby growth with multiple branches. So then this next year, I'll cut a third of these out of this paddock. We'll cut the branches off and allow them to then, they'll re-sprout, same as they did originally, from that. And it won't be like, 1/3 working in a solid line. Like it'll just be, I'll go through and cut like every third tree, okay? And then they'll regrow. We won't cut them to the ground, we'll cut them back to the nub. And what we'll do is we're also going to, every year, because I anticipate some loss, mostly that loss comes from the pigs love to chew on the bark, okay? So you can see where they strip the bark on these. Willow bark is very delicious, okay? Very, very great herbal remedy for a lot of things. It's where we actually get aspirin from. So the pigs love to chew on it, but then it kills the tree. And there's so many of these, I'm not going to put in tree cages for all of these. It is much cheaper for me every year to, when this area is just muddy and boggy, we do about, 50 to 100 of these cuttings like this every year from a couple of our other trees I'll show you. It's cheaper for me to just not protect them and let the pigs graze and sleep right up around them and destroy a few and just replant them. Once they get bigger, thicker trunks, it'll be harder for them to kill. Like this guy, he's had a few wounds in his life, but it's getting quite stout. So it'll be pretty hard for the pigs to mess that one up. You can see one here that they destroyed, but not a big deal. I will go through, and in this paddock alone, I will probably next year plant another 40 or 50, filling in spots that have been destroyed over the years. And then I'll give them something interesting to mess with. Like I said, they always break some. I'm not worried about it. Let's go look at some of the other bigger ones. Okay, real quickly as I'm walking my way up there, I just noticed these and wanted to touch on them real quick. This is something we started this year. So these are all this year's plantings. So this is a wallow, right? And it wasn't this bad when I planted that. The ground is pretty level. But there's a hill here. This actually slopes from there up. So the barrel used to be here, and this was a problem with the barrel constantly running. So we had planted these right on either sides of the barrel. So you can see they get quite a bit of water, and even when it was dry throughout the year, because this was a wallow, it got plenty of moisture. So these are 30 inches to 3 foot tall. All these branches are at the top. So planting these around the wallows means that, and I have them at every wallow now, and I'll put in a few more every couple of years because same as we expect the field ones, they do get chewed on. They have messed up those roots. But over the winter, I work on filling these wallows back in. And then every summer, the pigs just get to redig their wallows. And then these areas don't get worse and worse. They get better and better because they get added organic matter. I'm trying to see, I just saw a bunch here the other day, but now it's kind of dried up. There's a bunch of biochar. We throw a lot of biochar in here. This is actually the only paddock. This is paddock number 7. The only paddock I've been throwing biochar in, specifically just as a trial paddock, like we'll start adding it to some other paddocks, but I want to get each individual paddock up to about 10%, which is a lot when you're doing it one bathtub at a time. I'm getting ready to get another bathtub instead of just welding up a new thing. So yeah, real quick touch on doing these around the wallows so that then the pigs have shaded wallows all summer, and the willows will help pull out some of that water, so that we're always putting new water in and keeping them fresh, and reducing the amount of algae because they're shading it out. So the pigs get a shaded wallow that then grows less algae. Let's move on. Okay, so these are our tall ones, and I'll drop a side-by-side picture here. So I'm going to pan over a little bit so I have room. I'm going to drop a side-by-side of this February when I cut them, okay? So that is what they looked like this February, completely down to nubs, all right? Now to this, and you can see that 4-foot tall A-frame there at the bottom. Those are those branches coming off the nubs. A few of those are 8 to 10 foot tall in one season, okay? And a few of those branches are close to, oh my God, stuck a stick in my mouth, almost 2 inches across, okay? Not all of them are that big, but these are the ones that I'm telling you we'll plant. So even in the drought, all right, we still got this growth. Even in a drought, we got this much growth from these, okay? We have 3 of them here. And these are all my ones that'll be my big field plantings, the ones we just looked at. I'll cut and do this branch alone will give me 2 new trees out in my field. This branch will give me at least 2 new trees, as big as it is. This one over here is 2 new trees. That's probably 1 back there. Another 2, it looks like on that one. So these every year on this willow, and it has been cut every year back to the nubs I just showed you since it was 2018. So 4 years in a row, we have cut these trees back to stubs. They were standard sized trees that looked like that one out there, okay? And that tree, the stems were definitely smaller. They were much smaller when we cut them. But these trees catch up in height to that standard tree every year. We cut them back to nubs that are about 5 to 6 foot tall, and then it grows back in height to match the growth of that tree that's out in the field. That's absolutely amazing. So this winter, I will be cutting that standard size tree back. It has 3 good sized trunks, so it'll have 3 good heads, and we'll start developing that one because we have some smaller ones starting to grow out in the field now that are offering some shade. That was one of the only things of shade since the goats pretty much killed, and I'm sorry the sun is there, pretty much killed that mulberry right there. So that was some of the only shade in that paddock, but now we have some more willows coming up that are doing all right. So these big ones, and genetics definitely play a factor in these, okay? So this one never has done near as good as this pair, which is the same tree. It's just split at the bottom into 2 trunks. This one always puts out buds faster than the one over here behind me, okay? And they do a really good job of keeping most of the growth. Now they will grow lower down, but the pigs will prune those. They were kept out of here for quite a while, so they didn't start of the season. But now they're starting to chew them back, and I'll cut them back to the tree. But you really want to try to keep early enough in the season cut back to the stem on the low branches, or they'll form knobs like this. So most of the growth on this tree over here comes out of these random knobs throughout, instead of being nice big knob up high like we want. And so this, this year when I cut all the other ones off, all the branches off this, I'll clear cut this top knob back down, because this is just kind of rotting up here and creating a spot for disease to get into the rest of the tree. And while this is some good wildlife habitat to have some dead spots like this, dead logs, I don't want this tree to die from that, because this is a great thing of shade for this paddock. So yeah, these are our big ones. So I will plant some of these ones out as big ones, but I don't sell cuttings off this tree because I don't really like the genetics of this tree, because it doesn't leaf out as fast, and it doesn't grow as vigorously as this tree. So all the cuttings that I sell either come from the field ones, or from these 2, or from the ones in the backyard, which we'll go see in just a minute, which are our 18-inch tall pollards. So now you've seen this big bad boy. Yeah, let's go look at those ones in the backyard. Alrighty, so these ones have been cut twice. This is their 3rd year of growth. Okay, and all of these are about 12 to 18 inches above the ground. You see this one's got some crazy knobs growing. They're really, so this in their 3rd year here, they're starting to develop those nice thick knobs. as to where that should all grow from. And a few of these are real dense stems. And honestly, all these were branches cut from those other trees and pounded into our septic system, which you shouldn't do. This is one of those, I did this, you shouldn't do this type situations. So our septic system is just ridiculous and has never quite functioned. So I didn't mind going ahead and messing it up further. So willows growing into septic lines are a real big problem for most people. For us, it's not a big deal. So I went ahead and did that because this area was always a bog because it wasn't really functioning. But now I have a nice willow copse right out my kitchen window that I get to look at, okay? And so this one provides the bulk of my field plantings every year because I get a lot of these nice, big, thick, tall, straight, because of how densely planted together these are. I'll get 50, 60 easy, nice, big 4 to 6 foot tall cuttings out of here. Because you can see this goes back. I think there's just over 100 in here. And I've added more every year because you can see we've thrown in some curly willow this year, which didn't do real fantastic because of the drought. These are just some leftover standard 18-inch cuttings that we had. So they're what I'll do in that case, that I only have 18-inch cuttings in a spot that I'm not worried about pigs, but I want a taller nub. I'll probably leave these nubs, but what you can do is just like this one here. So this was the initial cutting, okay? Only came up to here, to right there. And what I did was when I cut that first year, I cut all of these other branches, left one to grow. It will heal up as one solid. It'll look a little funky, but it'll heal up enough where it's just a weird curve in the trunk. And then I'll cut it off here, strip these, and this will become my new top height. Okay, and that's actually, no, so that's what I did. So this is what we did this spring is we cut it off there. I couldn't see that behind that branch. Payday is trying to say hello. In case y'all want an update on him, he's doing fantastic and looking absolutely gorgeous. I am so happy to have him in our herd. But so there's where we're at with that. Then from then on, we can develop this into the new top piece. And we've done that with a few that have done pretty good. If they lean over to the side, it's not a big deal. This one will have 2 new trunks now. That is not great for long-term growth on the tree, but with willows, it doesn't really matter to me because if it dies, I'll plant a new one. It regrows in a year and you cut it every year anyways. So this is where we decided to make this section its new terminal. So this will form a nub and that'll form a nub. Yeah, and some of these smaller ones are ones we replanted a year or 2 ago because every year, like I said, I go back through and just refill in anywhere that, and so like there's one that's healing up really nicely. Oh, initial cutting was somewhere in here. Okay, we just left this stem and you can see how it's healed up to where it almost looks like, hi Pooper, hi. Where we left it to grow. And then this spring, I'll cut it about right here. And that'll get to form the new head the next year. And this one now that they're into year 3, I will be cutting back all of the big, really vigorous ones and leaving all of my ones like this that didn't really develop this year, okay? So that will allow me to do my about 1/3. We have every year so far, for the 2 cuttings we've done, mind you, just to get them established, we have cut every year in this copse. But now that they're all pretty established, but we have some new ones we're trying to get in, what I'll do is I will cut the big, nice, vigorous ones, okay? And then I will leave all the less than vigorous ones so they get first sun. And they'll flush out drastically sooner than all the rest of these will. The one thing that you'll notice, and what is the most terrifying thing ever while I'm just talking, you can see puppies, when you cut, it takes them like an extra month or 2 to leaf out over the standard trees left out there. Fluff belly rose. So it's always a scary act. First, you're cutting your tree down, right? That you're like, oh no, I planted this. And then it takes them a couple months more, month and a half maybe, to put out leaves. Whereas all the rest of your trees are kind of starting to swell buds and put out leaves. But they do, it's not a big deal, don't worry. they'll leaf out. Every year I go through that stress of, oh my God, did I kill it? Did I kill it? No, they come back every year. So yeah. And no, I wouldn't do, most of your species I wouldn't do every year. Willows, you can cut every year. Every 1 year is great for a lot of the ones like this. We're going to switch some of these to every 3 years, but keeping in mind that when I go to cutting every 3 years, I won't get as many cuttings from these that I can propagate into new trees, because after 3 years, I will have some big nubs, big old sticks that aren't going to be able to plant as easily as my big, thick 1 year growth cuttings are. So keeping in mind that what I will get after 3 years is I'm just getting added wildlife benefit for those other 2 years, and I will get more firewood or biochar, because the willow burns really, really fast. It still burns pretty hot, and it makes great kindling because of how fast it dries. So I can get some nice thick pieces of willow that are 2-3 inches thick to burn as some kindling firewood to get the fire going really fast. So, all right. That is all that I have for willow pollarding on our farm. We have the 3 different types, or 3 different heights, the 12 to 18 inches, the 3 to 4 foot, and the 6 to 8 foot, or well, 5 to 6 foot. If you were doing cattle, then you would want to do 6 to 8 foot. And so really, we do ours because of the areas that we have. This shorter 18-inch stuff is because it's nice and easy for me to manage. I don't have to bend over as much as I would on a coppice, but I could just as easily coppice back here. It's just easier for me to manage without having to bend over as far, and I don't need it to be as tall because we don't really run livestock in the backyard that often. Once in a while, I'll run the pigs through here real quick as just a flush graze, but never for long periods of time where I'm worried about them doing much damage. And then out in the field, like we talked about there, we do that because of those pigs' height. When we did the other willows that are the taller ones, we did them that height because we had goats still, and we were trying to be above the goats' height. The goats stand on their back legs. If we had sheep, it would, or well, when we did graze the sheep through there, it was fine. But the goats stand up on the trees and eat, whereas the goats or sheep didn't. So goats are a real pain in the butt. You're gonna have to go at least 8 foot tall because they will reach 6 foot easy standing on their backs if you have standard sized goats. But yeah, I think that rounds that out. We do the willow for wildlife, for cuttings to sell to folks to propagate their own, to propagate our own for our farm. All of our willows that are these standard black willows that I think is all I showed you in this video, beyond a couple little curlies, which we did skip. We have a couple big plantings of the 3 to 4 foot tall curly willows out in the field as pollards too. But they were just put in this year, so they only have like 2 to 3 foot tall of growth in another spot. They won't get cut this year. So we do willows for wildlife habitat, for shade for the livestock, to cut for cuttings to sell to folks, and for biochar. And then the occasional little bit of firewood from the thicker ones. But we don't really anticipate getting that much because we cut them so frequently. Yeah. Oh, and then we do ornamental bundles with all the curly willow. So yeah, and then some of the black willow. But it's puppies. Yeah, that'll be the end of this one, folks. If you have any questions about how we do the willow coppicing, I will be doing a video of us cutting it and how we process that this spring when we do that, because we cut in February every year. So thank you to our Patreon. Thank you to our Patreon patrons, Raymond and Ashley Hunter. And then thank you to the rest of you who have watched this video, to all of you who have watched this video, not the rest of you. Sorry, I'm getting like horribly distracted with these puppies. Yeah, thank you all for watching. If there's any content that you want to see, make sure to drop it in the comments. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments. And if you want to keep getting updates from our farm, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm going to squish some puppies for a little while longer and then go in and have some dinner. You guys have a good evening.